Welcome to Optimal Timelines. I am your guide, Sean Collins, and helping you to connect to your most optimal future timeline. So what do I mean by timelines? Well, in today's video, I'm going to talk about what a timeline is and how to create your most optimal one. So think of it this way. When we're born, all the way up to the present moment, that was a timeline that was created. And within that timeline, there were experiences and memories. Now, when we're younger, our timeline is not in our control at all. For example, you're born and you live in Texas until you're 10 years old, and then all of a sudden one of your parents gets a job in another state like California, and you change schools and you move to a new location. Well, that completely changes your timeline. You really had no control over that whatsoever. But as we get older, we begin to have more and more control of our timeline. And let me explain that a little bit more. So when this timeline is created and we have memories and experiences, we create thoughts and feelings regarding these experiences and these memories, bringing us up to the present moment. All of our thoughts, feelings, and actions and reactions help create our future timeline. Some examples are, well, I've always loved thinking of the future in this way because I did love history when I was growing up in school, and I love seeing the timeline of when one event happened and then another event, and you just got a more clear picture. And I really love looking at our futures in that way. So what are some of the things that can, as we get older, affect our future timelines? Well, let's say, for example, you choose a certain relationship and, you fall in love, and that will completely change your timeline for good or for bad. And it's only in hindsight that we see that the choices we made and what effect they had on our future. Some other examples are, I think of a time when I was driving. This was probably over a decade ago. And I had a passenger and I was driving, and we were at a intersection, and I was fiddling with the radio at the intersection, and I didn't notice that the light had turned green. And there was a car behind us, and my passenger said, hey, the light turned green. Did you know that? And I'm like, oh. And in that moment, the light turned green, and I delayed the person in back of me. So when we went through the intersection, they kind of cut in front of me, and cut me off without a signal. And I guess they were in a hurry. And we were both in the left-hand lane and getting ready to turn left at the next intersection. And we both pull up to the intersection. This car is now in front of me, turning left. And when the light turned green, there was a car that ran a red light and completely took out the car in front of me. And it really affected me, really, really shook me up for a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons is that I never looked at, from then on, driving the same way. Like if I'm ever delayed, it's very rare that I'll get like upset or whatever, because I'm thinking like, maybe I'm being delayed for a reason. And I don't know what happened to that person. It was a pretty bad accident. I was really, really shook up. I hope they're okay and that they made it out. But that person made a decision, in the moment that completely affected their timeline. That would have been me going through that intersection first. So very grateful for that. And, things like that. I mean, that's like an extreme example, but what are some other examples? Well, so our thoughts and feelings on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis really, really can affect our timeline. To give you an extreme example, like let's say there's a person, we've all met people in our life throughout this. So let's say like they're really, really like a nasty person. Like they're always in a bad mood, or they, whatever, they just come to work, they're just complaining and they're always in a bad mood. Well, the people around them, that has an effect. Our energy does reverberate out from us. It doesn't stay within the skin. And you can feel that when you're around a person like that. Well, that's bound to affect their timeline. Maybe they're passed up for job promotions, or maybe someone that they're interested in romantically, is not interested because they hear they have a bad attitude. But things like that can really affect our timeline. So basically the point of all this is that our thoughts, feelings, actions, and reactions create our reality, and that reality creates our future timeline. I love thinking about it in this way. And I've broken it down into 3 steps in how we can get on the most optimal timeline. Step 1 is know yourself, know ourselves. And it's so important because you think, a lot of people think, well, I know myself. I've been living with myself, my whole life. But let me reframe that and put it in another way. I've given this example in videos before, and it bears repeating. I want you to think about 3 people in your life who you love and are close to and you know very well. Wouldn't you say that all of those people that you know really well, you can see their good points and their bad points. You can see their shadow side, and their great side. Now, you still love them and you accept them, but you could see that there's things in their life that they can't see that maybe are not helping them or not furthering, putting them on their best timeline. We just know that about people. It could be family members. It could be someone in a romantic relationship, a child, a sibling. Okay, so have you ever met anybody that did not have some sort of flaws that they weren't aware of? No. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there are if everyone else in your life you've ever met has a blind spots, is what Jan Spiller, the great astrologer, has always said. If they have blind spots in their lives, then we must have blind spots in our life. So that's where self-knowledge comes in. And the best place to get self-knowledge is we can get, feedback from the universe, from others, the universe kind of mirroring things back, but also our astrological birth chart, which was at our time of birth, a stamping of energy or an imprint. So it's literally like a blueprint of our soul and our soul path. So by delving into that, in particular, this channel looks at evolutionary astrology, the north and south node of the moon, and the planet Pluto. Please see my North Node video, part 1 and 2, for more information on that. So it's that self-knowledge that can really help us. Now, I think all of us have experienced at one time or another, we've come across an aspect of ourself that wasn't flattering. It's very uncomfortable when you have to admit, like, wow, okay, I should have handled that in a different way. I completely messed that up. And so it's the reason why a lot of us don't really look at ourselves too closely. The other thing is that these blind spots, it's not that we're ignoring them a lot of times intentionally. A lot of times it's because we're just not aware of them, or we think that they're part of us and that there's no other way to think and be. It's just like, that's who I am. I'll give you an astrological example. And sorry to pick on Virgos, it's just the first thing that came into mind. But let's say you have a really strong, within your chart, a lot of Virgo energy, and maybe the negative side of Virgo, which can be a little bit too analytical, too critical, not seeing the big picture, focusing on details, nitpicky and whatnot, okay? That taken to an extreme level, can really hinder your life, like basically being anal, it's people will say wow, chill, Now, people that have that signature, and we all have them in our life and in our astrological chart, can't see it. They're just like, well, that's how I think and feel. It's how I am. But if they really observe themselves and they see how its effect in their life, and they could see like, okay, this is a tendency I have, and maybe I can tone it down a bit. That's where self-knowledge comes in. Like if you've noticed, if you look back and if something's not serving you, if you've had a lot of people tell you the same thing or you run into the same obstacles, maybe it's that, we need to adjust something in our life. And it's a great thing. It's well worth the effort. It's not comfortable all the time, but the other thing is too is when you know yourself, one of the ways you do that is by observation. So in my North Node video, I do talk about that, about like self-observation. But when we observe ourselves, we want to be careful not to judge ourselves or beat ourselves up, but do it in a way where you're just gathering knowledge. The same thing is like, someone close to us, like you kind of know some of those, negative aspects that they have, and you love them and you accept them. And you don't, if we're really close and you love them, you try not to judge them. Don't judge yourself, because like I said, we all have these tendencies, and in knowing them and correcting them, that's how we can really, really get ourselves on the most optimal timeline. So that self-knowledge is like super, super important. Okay, so step 2 in helping to create your most optimal future timeline is heal yourself. Heal yourself in the present moment and make sense of it. Heal your past and those memories and make sense of those. And that can be done through the self-observation, the reflection, meditation, and also your astrological chart. When you begin to heal yourself, you begin to realize that you are the one that has the power in how you want to frame your past and how you want to frame your present. The past has no power over you, only what you let it have. Okay? I realize that we've all gone through some really intense things in our life, and those are experiences, but they have to be healed and processed. They're not happening to you now. Okay? And in this present moment, this is that sacred space where we are creating our reality and creating our future. So that's step 2, self-healing. Okay, so step 3 is maintaining your optimal present self in order to create your most optimal future timeline. So how you do that is by repeating the first 2 steps. Knowledge and observe yourself. Heal that, make sense of it, and then that creates your present moment and reality, thus your future. So we know that our thoughts and our emotions and our actions and reactions create our present reality, and our present reality is creating our future timeline. So that's what we really want to focus on, is repeating this process, and it becomes second nature. What are some of the things you can do in your daily life to help you with this? One of the things I like to do is, as I'm going through my day, when I start to slip, like let's say a thought slips through where it's negative, I have different things that I do to correct that. But one great way is to stop yourself when you catch it. Like let's say a thought comes through that's kind of negative, or you say or do something and you kind of regret it. You just say, okay, I see you. I'm not going to judge you, but I'm going to make corrections. And I immediately ask myself, okay, was that thought, action, reaction, that emotion, was it helping me to create my most optimal future timeline? And you just, this is like a daily task. It's an ongoing thing. And it gets easier with time, but it, just like I said, it pays off like huge in your life, because you start to notice that, they don't come up as much, or, these negative things, you can kind of nip them in the bud, so to speak. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is A lot's been said about parallel universes, where we exist in different universes on different timelines, and there's a lot of thoughts about, jumping timelines, or, quantum jumping. I wanted to clarify this point because you hear this a lot, and I think it gets kind of confusing. There could very well be parallel universes, and that we could exist on different timelines, all in this present moment. I don't know, but we experience this life in linear time. So even though time, maybe on the real level, doesn't exist and only the present moment exists, for us, time does exist. Like, if you want to get good at something, you must practice it over time and you gain that skill. Everything in our experience is linear time. So the same thing goes with, jumping timelines. You cannot jump out of your past. Okay? And I've heard some people talk about that, but it's impossible. And I'll give you an example how it's impossible. And it's actually a good thing, because our past has memories, it has our karma, and it literally is, from the moment of our birth to this present moment to our future, it is a direct line. It's our history. Now, let's just say, I'm going to use a really silly example. Let's say that you go outside and your neighbor buys a brand new car. And you go out and you take a big bucket of hot glue one morning while they're sitting out there, drinking their coffee in their driveway, looking at their new car, and you dump, hot glue all over the car. And now, I know it's mean, it's just an example, and it's an extreme example. They come out running, and then you decide that you're going to completely change your life, and you leave for a year to study with all the top gurus around the world, and to ascend to a higher level, to become enlightened, okay? And you are super sorry that you did that. Maybe you even give them money, you send them money. Okay, no amount of things you could do can erase that from your timeline, okay? Likewise, every good thing that we do is not erased either, okay? That I guarantee you that now, you can change your future timeline. You can do things to heal that, like obviously, like buy them a new car or get their car fixed or apologize. But that memory, you can never jump off at the timeline where that happened. That's my point. You can't do it. And that's where I want to make that really clear, that, that is our actual good thing. This is our life experience from birth to the future. This is our experience. So lastly, I just want to say something about your future self. So think back 5, 10, 20 years in your life. If you could go back in time and give your past self advice, what advice would you give your past self? Now, granted, let's say that you are not giving people advice to invest in Google or Facebook. Okay, but let's just say advice on living life and different things, giving your past self a heads up. What would you say? Would you give your past self a heads up about, oh, don't get into this relationship? Or would you give your, past self advice on, you should really go down this career path, have the courage to do this? Really think about it. Because anywhere you're at, if you look back 5, 10, 20 years, you're not the same person you were. And as they say, hindsight is 20/20, okay? And we don't have the luxury of going back and changing the past, but we do have the ability to change the future. So the question to you is, if there is a parallel reality and your future self could come back to this present moment, what do you think they would tell you? What advice would they give you? Would they tell you you should really make that relationship change, or you should really not let that person go, or you should go on this career path and have the courage to do so. Think about it. It's really, really interesting. So if we know that we're creating our future reality, and we know that if we could go back in time, we would probably give huge amounts of advice to our past self, then wouldn't it be wise to really think about where we are in the present, making the most optimal choices for the most optimal timeline? Anyway, things to think about. Thank you so much for liking, for watching and subscribing. Really appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you on other videos. Much love, many blessings.